And by the way, if you really want your money to multiply, grab a Mormon. I'm just telling you. So you can see why I'm not as popular as I could have been. So we talked about Trump, and people, of course, people would have cringe factor until gradually there was this, and I didn't care where I went. I mean, I was invited to, it was so good. Naivety is a gift, because the pure all things are pure, and you don't know any better. Yeah. I mean, I was in the heart of Democrat South Atlanta at a largely black congregation. I'm saying Donald Trump's the Cyrus and and believe it or not, I get half the people there on board with me. Because I didn't know you're not supposed to talk about these things in certain places. It's kind of like preaching the gospel. I heard a guy say this recently, and it struck me as so powerful. He said, boldness is not needed in 98% of the things that are preached. Because you only need boldness when you're saying something that the audience doesn't want to hear. Wow. Now think about that. Lord, granted your service with all boldness and may preach thy word. Why would you have to have boldness? Because they killed Jesus. They were hunting him down. They were locking him up. They were intimidated. It required boldness to be faithful. You don't need boldness unless you're saying something people don't want to listen to. Wow. Right. How many sermons fall in that category? Most of them are like itching ear stuff. We're living in the days when people kind of like are competing for clickbait sermon titles and so forth. And this has been a large part of our demise as a nation. While the church had religious liberty, it didn't want, it still does, this is weird, it still doesn't want to get involved with politics because it's so controversial and divisive. Well, it's only controversial and divisive if the devil takes over politics and decides to destroy the church. Amen. What are you supposed to do? You can't wave your magic intercessory prayer cloth and make it all go away. Listen, I'm all for the shofar blowers. I've been around them my whole life. I'm 20% Ashkenazi Jew. My sister's an Israeli. I'm probably more Jewish legally than most people in the room. But when it comes to spirituality and taking territory, you have to really start thinking about what happened to Israel. What did God do with the Jewish people? He gave them the covenant. He gave them freedom. He gave them blessing. And then he warned them that if you don't deal with what's in your land, the Babylonians are going to come take it from you. And sure enough, the Babylonians laid siege and took it away from them. I know this is an edifying moment in your life, right? But I'm telling you, it's and people are. I think we have our own version of QAnon in the church. I'll tell you what Q does. The problem with the Q thing, for those of you who don't know, so I have my audience doesn't know. By the way, I have a large audience. It's just a very mixed up audience. It's all over the place. I got people in the strangest places listening. But so Q, for those of you who don't know, QAnon, Q is a 4chan or a source of information that comes from some mystery origin that speaks as though it knows what's really going on. And it's predictive of what's going to happen next. And it uses buzzwords like where we go when we go all, which is a counterfeit for as one. And they have Great Awakening. They're sprinkled great. So they have just enough religious buzzwords to be able to capture those people in America who know the media is lying and who distrust the institutions of government because they've been taken over to a great extent by fascist spirits. Yeah. So where do you go to get the truth? QAnon was the source. Except QAnon was nutty. And QAnon wasn't divulging who it was. And anytime you have an important revelation and you can never verify the source, listen, if someone brings you a cocktail and they can't tell you where they got it from, don't drink it. Amen. So I had prophets that were, I was seeing they were prophesying a little bit of the Q flavor because I'd be getting all these Q links and Q posts. Yeah. They're coming in left and right. Coming in for very intelligent people, too. You know what they have? The same problem we have. So desperate for hope, they'll believe anything, and they distrust traditional origins, and the church isn't saying anything, so they're getting it from weird sources. Yeah. Then I realized one day, QAnon is the counterfeit for a prophetic culture. Now, let's come around. You mind if I have this conversation? See, I feel like since we don't have as many people here as an ordinary session, I have some degree of liberty to type of things. Back up and feel obligated to say something, or just be a whole bunch of great one-liners. But you see, because it's a more sparse crowd, I feel a little edge of danger. So I would walk around and talk about Donald Trump, and so there was, of course, after Donald Trump gets elected, then people realize how prophetic I was. And then, of course, everybody else claimed to be prophets also, and claimed that they knew it all along, which is frustrating to me because when you're standing alone, you really wish you had a multitude of people who were standing with you.
Wow.
And later on, and so I just goes, well, that's good, very good, okay, so we're all on the same page now. But then you see, the point that was missed was that Donald Trump was an interruption to the destruction of the United States. Because the nature of Washington, D.C., and the nature, and we have to catch this. And listen, it's our vulnerability as Christians, because we believe in the supernatural, we believe in God, we believe in the prophetic, we believe in miracles. There's the danger there. There's the line of cocaine. You can keep going after the supernatural, and you can miss being shrewd and wise and understanding what the devil is up to.
Yeah.
And while you're over here chasing this, listen, man, listen, so great revival churches found out there was a pedophile in the nursery.
Yeah.
They were so focused on what God was doing in the sanctuary, they didn't go to the nursery.
Wow.
Yeah.
Then the whole church is under trauma while they're dealing with the aftermath. I'm telling you, these are people that are friends of mine.
Yeah.
It's like, man, you have to be able to be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. You got to believe the supernatural. At the same time, you have to be understanding what the devil's up to, and you have to know how to occupy the ground God gave you.
Yeah.
If you don't occupy, the devil will take it from you. This is the story of Israel.
Come on, say it.
All right, so Trump is okay. So Trump comes along, and then I'm noticing something kind of unusual. I'm noticing that he's doing phenomenal things. My big fear, my big anxiety attack. Because I think it's a generational thing. I think part of being Jewish is we have a tendency to anxiety anyway. Something's going wrong. I know it does. It's too good to be tried. You just watch it.
Look at his.
So the whole time I was like, because I said, you know what's going to happen? What's going to happen is the church is given a window for reformation.
Wow.
But if the church doesn't go through the window that God gave, then my big fear was I kept seeing the situation with Elisha, the great prophet Elisha. Remember how he's dying of the sickness whereof he died? I like the King James, it's always so grand. And he's dying of the sickness whereof he died. Unlike other deadly sicknesses. But he's dying of the sickness whereof he died. And while he's dying, the king, I guess Joash, comes to him and goes, my father, which is a Hebrew way of saying, oh no, you're leaving. And so he said, what are we going to do? Elisha summons his strength. Open the window to the east, opens the window to the east. Take these arrows, shoot through the window, puts his hands up the king's hands. Shoot! Fires to the east window. This is all prophetic action, obviously, right? Then Elisha goes, smite the arrows in the ground. It's lying there. The king goes, Elisha's furious. I can't believe it! How could you blow an opportunity like this? The king goes, what do I do? Everything you hit is a bizarre symbolism.
Yeah.
Elijah said, don't you understand? Everything we just did is a revelation of intent. It's a disclosure of your condition. You only smote the ground 3 times. You came for a miracle, you got it, and you only pursued half of what I had available.
Yeah. Come on.
Oh, wow.
Now you're going to beat him 3 times. If you had smitten 6 times, you would have wiped out your enemies, but now you're going to have a partial deliverance. So what do we have? We have a flurry of executive orders. We have, initiatives with Israel. We got the economy coming back. We got this, we got that. But for the most part, you just see the bigger mobilized outrage of hell working through. Oh, guess what? 7 months. This is another thing that frustrates me. So I come along with this message of 7 months before Trump.
Yeah.
Everybody else jumps in on it. It's all confused. I don't know who started. I started it, but I don't care how many people get in on it. Like that. And the thing is, it's always, nobody's in it in the beginning. As soon as it catches on, everybody's in the swimming pool. And then the little Jew starts it. Oh, who is he? I don't know who he is. Have you ever heard of him? No. Anyway. Wait a second, what's with this? What's with the this doesn't have the juice it had last time. I need some juice for Jesus. Right, so here's the thing, and I hate going back to the basics, but the basics are not really the basics. I'll show you something I learned. I learned this at a very expensive secular retreat. I want to show you this. You can use this, by the way, on your own, and it'll make you a lot of money as a consultant. You see, a lot of people think they know something because they heard it.
Right.
Mastery is in the distinctions. If you go with a wine connoisseur, they'll talk to you about the legs of the wine, about the composition of the grape, about the aging, about the year, about the vineyard, about the odor, about how much it costs. See, all I know is one glass is it for me. Anyway, so this is what you call a 30-fold revelation. Now I'm really going to get Pentecostal. This is all you can question my theology anytime you want. Pop a chair will straighten it out. That's what we got. 30. This is a 30-fold revelation. But then you could go a little further. You hang around with enough meetings. You hang out long enough with enough teaching. Then you start getting more nuances, greater distinctions. Those distinctions will create a greater degree of mastery. Mastery is always in the distinctions. Remember, you want to write that down. Mastery is in the distinctions. Talk to someone that really knows what they're doing. They'll tell you exactly what to focus on, what works. You can see that with Mario Morello last night. I watched preachers. Do you know there's a way to take an offering and a way not to take an offering? I didn't know that. I thought sheer sincerity and generosity works. I found out sheer sincerity and generosity can take a terrible offering. One time I was with Kim Clement. He flew in at his own expense, and I'm going to have to raise money for me. He doesn't charge me a thing. He's got a whole band. He's got the whole group, the whole shenanigans. I rent this big tent in Providence, Rhode Island, and I've got this big advertising going on, and the prophet of God's come. And so he comes, he says, Lance, why don't you go just receive the offering? I get up, and I said, you all know that we want to hear what Kim has to say, so I'm not going to take a whole lot of time with the offering. The Lord will bless you as you sow into what he is doing. And instructing him, I sat down, this is so crushing to me. This man I got, who I wanted to impress, a potential new friend. He leans over me and says, that was the best offering I've ever had in my life. I didn't know that offerings actually had scores. It's like a 1, 5, and 10. There's an art to everything.
Yes.
First, you have to build some degree of expectation. You have to build some connection between people, but there's sowing in an outcome that comes back to them. Well, I watched him have to do damage control because, like he said, I'll be happy I'll be lucky if I get out of here with my airfare. I thought, oh, this is killing me. So then I started watching him take an offer. I watched Rodney Howard Brown take an offer. And I learned there's actually levels and degrees of mastery in taking an offer. Boy, am I good at offerings now. You'll get your airfare when I'm done with it. 60-fold is a greater degree of mastery of the distinctions. Things you didn't even know were important. So they say, oh, I don't even know what an offering actually has. Then you can go for 100-fold. 100-fold. Now you're talking about, watch this. See, this is more dimensions. You see more dimensions of the subject. Other people see that. Aha, but look at this. You are actually seeing a geometric form. Not exactly perfect, but who cares? Well, we got to fix this one here. Good.
Yeah.
You got the idea?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What you have is a three-dimensional revelation of something. This is like 100-fold. So my spiritual mom, who was a great prophet, she said, some people have enough salvation to get to heaven, they understand the way. But others are actually working out their salvation to a greater degree. They know the truth. But then there's a company that'll press into the 100-fold life. They have mastery. They can now not only teach it, they can produce it. You see, Che has mastery in finance. You know, Lou Engle had sincerity and passion and zeal and a prayer anointing, but he couldn't get one single thing off the ground until Che came along and helped him succeed. I heard this from him. I said, how is this possible? He said, because Che, I'm pointing, where's Che? He's in the room. Is he somewhere in the room? He's not in the room? Good, I can talk about it. When he would raise up the offering, the thing would get paid for. Lou wasn't raising the money. Che was able to get the thing orchestrated apostolically and funded.
Wow.
One city, another city, another city, another 7 cities. It wasn't because Lou I found something out. And this is a fact. I found out this is one of the most powerful intercessors in the world, people that really know God, that are intimate with God. And I heard this from Mike Murdoch, and it's a very true point. He said his father was an intercessor, He got before God for hours a day, knew the presence of God, to walk in the presence of God, was interceding at the throne of grace, but he had poverty all over his life, because what he got out of intercession was intimacy and presence, but what he didn't get was wealth, because there's a certain harvest you get with certain things. Intercession is going to give you access to intimacy and presence, but wisdom is what produces wealth. That's how come you see the people that are the richest people in this room right now aren't necessarily spending all the time before the throne of grace, but they got the wisdom to be able to know how to make money. Does this make sense to you? I'm trying to be a good Jewish rabbi and teaching these things. So like Murdoch said this, he said, listen, my dad is a classic testimony of this. He said, now I have the wisdom to make money, so I bought my dad a house, I take care of his bills, and my dad's working for me in the ministry. He said, but I learned something. I learned that intimacy alone isn't a substitute for wisdom. So you can be an intercessor and still not have the wisdom to run a business. Does that make sense? Yeah. But then you put people together and you get great combinations. You got someone that has faith as an intercessor that teams up with a business person who recognizes they don't have the faith level that the intercessor has, and now the person who may be poor financially is rich in faith, takes the person who's rich financially but not so strong in faith, and God causes the two to create a unity that can help both of them out. Some people have enough. So this is like salvation, the way of salvation. Then the truth. You should know, what did you say? You should know the truth, but sanctify them by their truth. So sanctification is really an outworking of the truth applied to your life. Sanctify them by their truth. Thy word is truth. And then, of course, salvation comes this way, and then, sanctification comes this way. And you could say that justification. Justification, sanctification, and glorification. God is going to be glorified by a glorious church. The glorious church is going to have to press into a greater measure of this. There's the argument for pressing in, continuing to press in. I know that we love grace messages because we're all going to go to heaven by grace, but you realize there are rewards in heaven based upon obedience, sacrifice, and a whole different criteria. But America ought to understand this. Salvation is free, but rewards actually are allocated based upon faithfulness with the assignment God gave you. For that reason, you don't care about the crowds and stuff like that, because you want to make sure you're on the thing you're supposed to be doing at the time you're doing it. So what I'm saying is I could go on with this. It's a lot of fun because there's dimensions to this. There's ways you can go further with this. This is really so great a salvation that there's a church, an overcoming church. So an overcoming church, the old timers, the latter rain, the overcomers would be over here. This would be people that when you look at the bride has made herself ready. Well, you got that over there. So let's take a look at 7 numbers and realize most people have just got this 134 revelation. Boom, I got it, they moved on. You got to see what's happening now. Do you see what's happening now? See, I put the church over here. I said, there's the church over here. And then you got your families over here. Then you have education. You got your government, and in that you got your courts and your military. We don't get lost in the details. You got your media. You got your arts and entertainment. And then you got your business. Now here's what I noticed. I noticed that's a good 30. Oh, okay, I got to set amount. Yeah. But you see what's happened to America? Yeah. Is the devil has taken over the high places at the top of these mountains. You have to catch that 60-fold revelation. Get the truth of this thing. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that there's a disproportionate influence always at the top. That's why you're here. But for instance, Papa Chase recognizes an apostolic leader. We have the people that he has in a meeting like this. They're on a sheet like Jim Gomez and James and various others. The people that will be here, they're recognized leaders. They're at the top of the hierarchy of discerned subject matter expertise. And so here you got the church there. And the family, it's the only thing that's interesting how God equalized this institution is the mother and the father. It's beautiful how God set it up so that no matter how much of the world is backslid, you could still raise your children in the Spirit of God. The patriarchs could still raise up an overcoming family because they practiced their faith in their house. It's the beautiful ultimate equalizer. It's the ultimate threat to the devil. It's what goes on in the house. Yeah. But then you got the education. I don't want to take time to overkill a point, but here's the thing. What has happened here, I'm going to put these gates here. See, this is what gates is. I found out that this actually is ironic, but this is the Chinese word for gates. Is that word right there, because it looks like a gate. So what's happened is the devil has been expeditious at occupying the gates of influence. And I would say this to you, when the church is worried about the gates of hell, the gates of hell can do nothing unless there's agreement on earth. Wow.
That's
See,
right.
for Satan to do anything, he has to have agreement. He can't just make something happen. And by the way, God can't just make something happen. He has to have agreement. Where two or more are gathered together in my name, see, there's the power of agreement.
Right.
You and I have to agree with what the Father's doing in order to become the church that is legislating on earth what he wants to do in heaven. But the devil does a counterfeit. He gets people in agreement with him. The next thing you know, there's anarchy, there's craziness, there's LGBTQ legalizations, and then there's coming after you because you're not recognizing the right language as such. You see, what's happening is those gates are becoming militarized and occupied because the church really didn't believe the seven-out message. They just liked it and moved on.
Say it.
I'm telling you. I'm looking at this now. And I'm realizing we actually never went further down the road. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because it's more fun to pursue revival than it is to pursue a reformation.
Wow.
See, a reformation is no fun. Let's be honest about this. Who wants to get involved with the activists and getting people's face, have them mad at you and stalking you and finding you and harassing your children? Who wants to be taken off of Facebook and losing all their likes and not making a living anymore and getting involved with politics and being smeared and having themselves uninvited from the places they want to go? Nobody. See, reformation is interesting. Revival is Rachel. You guys all remember the story of Rachel? Rachel was the voluptuous, beautiful woman that Jacob wanted to marry. He saw her, he wanted to have that woman. He did the lust of the eyes, but he was like, I have that woman. He worked for 7 years to get that woman. But his father-in-law, boy, what a deal. His father-in-law had another daughter who was older than her named Leah. Leah was the unattractive sister of Rachel. When Jacob makes the deal with his father-in-law, he thinks after the 7 years he's actually earned the right to have Rachel. He wakes up in the morning. He didn't know this at night. At night, he wasn't paying attention. I guess in the morning he wakes up and he sees this lady. What the heck? He went to bed with this, he woke up with that. And this is where the church is right. Put horns on it. It's fake news because the high places, the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, all got occupied by demons that took it over.
Yeah.
Christians weren't told, get into journalism. No. We have altar calls for missionaries, signs and wonders, people going to Bible schools, planting churches. We got more apostles than actually exist. They're all apostles. They're all crowding out over here, trying to get a social media following, get a TV contract, get a day star, get a best-selling book. Meanwhile, media. Conservative on your average college campus. Yeah. What the heck? And we're sending our children off to these prestige universities. My child's going here, my child's going there. You're sending your child to an intellectual pedophile. So they can come out with a degree. Then you find out they're weaponized against faith, America, and you. Yeah. Where did that come from? Because the devil's smart. He knows the seven mountain message better than we do. He says if you're going to disciple a nation, you have to get a hold of the next generation through academia. You've got to get a hold of public opinion through media. You've got to make your heroes by telling stories through entertainment. Then you've got to fund it through business. So what do you got? You got these knuckleheads over there on Wall Street. At war, Coca-Cola is attacking election integrity.
Yeah.
Now, Delta Airlines, the big corporations, 90% of them gave their money over to the Democratic Party because that's where they feel they're going to get the biggest return. These knuckleheads. Right. They're sowing into another iceberg for the American economy. We got $4 trillion since we've been sitting here. $5 trillion by the time the meeting's over. Where's that going to go? You ought to read a book. I got a book. All of the stuff I describe in the book is very frustrating to me. I said every single thing that's happened. Except that I kept on focusing on trying to get Donald Trump elected because I knew the only thing that could happen is if we could just squeeze out 3 more arrow shots out of the church. Yes. Hi, honey.
Give it away.
I will give it away. I'll give it away. I'm serious about this. This is my personal frustration. Do you know? How many of you heard about the vaccine passport? Yeah. said, no, my God. Of all the ingenious things to come from Israel, of all the places, what the heck is wrong with my Jewish kinfolk over there? They're coming up on a vaccine passport so that you can't buy and sell unless you've had this vaccine passport. It's going to be a digital vaccine passport so that you can have what? Your medical history plus your financial capacity. See, all of this, everything is predicted right here. And this is coming out of the geniuses at Davos, the World Economic Forum. I'm sorry, this is where you've got your globalists, Bill Gates and Soros money, and they got China's over there. Of course, the President Xi talking about the global economy. So the EU plans on sinking the United States back to a subordinate role so that it will play ball with the global empire, the global economy, and then your digital tech oligarchies are going to give you on your phone, your Apple phone or whatever, they're going to give you the ability to have your own digital passport, and it's going to eventually be a digital currency and digital tracking device because you should be digitally meeting in digital houses for digital Bible studies.
Right.
It's all right here. You think I could get people to listen to me? No. Every prophet had an opinion. I'll tell you the mistake that prophets make. Trump became excited. Suddenly everybody wakes up. Oh, Trump is, it's another bad. Oh, and the Christians are starting to realize, hey, maybe this guy isn't so bad. Then the people start prophesying, Trump. See, what we didn't realize was how much of this mountain right here, where the real battle is coming next, how much of this wasn't ever sold on Trump, didn't like him, and was just waiting and biding their time. We did not have the degree of unity at all over here. And a lot of the biggest people at the top didn't want to risk being attacked because the guys that did speak up, like Jensen Franklin, they lost tons of thousands of people and thousands of revenue. They were like a testimony of, well, you can get it back, but the fact is, who wants to go through that kind of trauma?
Yeah.
So the church didn't fully stand over there. They were afraid to talk. But I've got something in here. Boy. The digital currency, the digital passport, all predicted. The EU, what it's about to do. All right here. But it's the Billy Graham prophecy that has me the most excited. To this day, we still don't get this. Billy Graham was the last of the presidents that actually played golf with presidents, like 9 presidents. They all invited him to the White House. They all liked him, and Obama and him met together. So he was an era when evangelicalism and Christianity were actually embraced by government, and even in his death, when he had his coffin there at the Capitol, you'll see the statesman. You see it reluctantly. You could just see it. They had to come. He was the final Christian, Holy Ghost, Bible-holding evangelical who everybody begrudgingly had to recognize was a good guy. Yeah. Donald Trump goes over, I'll never forget this. He goes up and taps the coffin 5 times. He doesn't even know what he's doing 5 times. He says, see, even when they talk about smiting arrows, even when it's tapping coffins, he's an exuberant person. 5 times he hits the coffin. He says, he prays that God will raise up a new generation of male and female Billy Grahams. America needs it. I bet you didn't hear that. He was at the United Nations calling out world leaders for their persecution of Christians and Jews. Calling them out the day that they had the stupid impeachment over his indiscreet comments about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and deals with China and the Ukraine, which are all true, by the way. Yeah. So they're going to impeach him for dairy. And so that came out, and that story obliterated the real story, which was the United Nations. And for the first time, instead of a president going, climate change, let's talk about the biggest threat, he said, you know the biggest threat? It's socialism, and it's shutting down the freedom of religion, especially Jews and Christians. Over here that don't want to hear that kind of thing, so they're all negative on Trump. So anyway, Billy Graham, I'll never forget this, when Billy Graham dies, I was 99 years of age. He died a couple of weeks before my dad died. He was 99, and I remember, because I always thought when Billy Graham goes with my dad's the same generation, I think they're going to be closer. Sure enough, my dad did go. But I was very happy to say that my dad, I prayed with him. Have you ever had one of those family members that you're not sure they're saved, but you keep making them say a sinner's prayer? I'm telling you. I know 4 evangelists that prayed personally with Donald Trump. Made him say a sinner's. I think he thinks it's part of our regular confession. Honestly, I think he's like totally confused now. I sinner, write my name in the Lamb's Book of Life, forget my sins. Anyway, but I knew my dad had to have made it. And I know because he tells me, he said, did you hear about my friend? I go, what do you mean your friend? He goes, my friend Billy Graham. He was referring to him as his friend Billy Graham. When he passed away, our friend is gone. Wow. So you see, he was speaking out of his spirit already. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. And I prayed, I said, Dad, don't be surprised. When it's your turn, that evangelist, he might be the one guy, one face you're going to recognize first will be him, and he'll welcome you up there. He said, you think so? I said, I think so. So Billy Graham is lying there, and it's technically not in state, but there's a certain sophisticated word for it, but it's kind of like lying in state, because the whole State Department will come out and acknowledge it. And Trump is hitting the coffin 5 times and decreeing a new generation of Billy Grahams. But then I get a text from Lester Summerall's grandson. Lester was curiously named Lester Summerall. So I get the text, he says, are you aware of what day this is? I go, what do you mean? I'm just reading about Billy Graham, and then, they're watching. He goes, no, today is the Feast of Purim. Today is significant because today marks a unique day in the history of Israel. I'll tell you what, we got it right here. You know what it is? It's the day when the disposition of American government towards Christianity goes from playing golf and liking Christians to actually organizing persecution against them. Wow. The Feast of Purim was the feast that dealt with Haman and the organization of government for the extermination of Jews. Why would God have Billy Graham lying there in a coffin on the Feast of Purim? And why? Because it's a prophetic symbol that the era has changed. Wow. So what's the word? The word is that the Jews had to actually organize themselves in order to overcome what was working against them. They had to, for their own survival, work as one. Another saying, whose currency I have helped create, I was quoting a scene from Gladiator years ago. Everywhere I go, as one, conferences are popping up. First time we did it, I confirmed this with Charles Stock. I watched the movie Gladiator. I remember the great scene. I was going to do it today, but it required too much technical preparation. I was going to have a soundtrack for you. But it's a great scene in the movie Gladiator. When you got Marcus, we have Marcus
Aurelius,
who has passed off the mantle now to Maximus, who's supposed to be the emperor of Rome, but his crazy son, Commodus, decides to kill his father and also kill Maximus because he's a political threat. I don't want to complicate the story if you never saw the movie. It's 20 years, you should have seen it by now. Anyway, there's a scene in the movie, I'll never forget because I felt the anointing. I get the anointing at the strangest times, which is kind of, because I was wondering, thinking, if the rapture happens and I'm in the wrong movie, will I go? So anyway, I'm watching The Gladiator, and there's a scene where ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you a recreation of the second fall of mighty Carthage. And there you are in the arena in Rome with the bloodlusting mob in the dirt Colosseum, and they're waiting for the violence and the gore. And an announcement is being made, and then you see Maximus with his small group from North Africa looking to see who are they fighting. It's a gladiator school, and the announcement continues. We bring you a recreation of the second fall of mighty Carthage. There on the barren plains of Sarna stood the invincible army of the barbarian Hannibal, brutal mercenaries bent on merciless destruction. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you the barbarian horde. At that moment, Maximus goes, okay, that's us. This is a theatrical reproduction here. He says, any of you ever been in the army? They go, yeah, because you can help me. I love these lines. Every one of them is anointed. Yeah. Wow. You can help me. Whatever comes through those gates. I look how Russell Crowe did it. It's hilarious because Russell Crowe actually plays a Spaniard gladiator, and he sounds like he's really from New Zealand or Australia. Yeah. Whatever comes through those gates, we have a better chance of survival if we work together. Says the Spaniard.
Did that too well.
So, watch how it happens. This is the sequence. Come together. The gates fly open. Chariots come swirling around and begin to swarming in the circle, and they're getting closer and closer. These chariots with the mighty iron wheels, and the chariot riders with spears and arrows flying off the back. And he's Maximus' commanding, come together. Come closer, closer. And they're backing up tentatively with their shields. And as they come together, they form a circle called the Roman Tortoise, because they're all trained in the military, so they understand how to walk in unity and defend their formation as a remnant against a greater force. All of this is hint, hint for the church. So each of them has a shield of faith, which means a measure of anointing, a measure of faith. It covers basically them and their calling, but not enough to cover their state or their nation. But if they will come together in unity, they will create a dynamic remnant that can overthrow the vehicles that are coming through the gates of hell. Through media, through government, through big business, you can overturn it. But the crowd is watching. Because whatever you're doing it in front of a spectacle audience. A nation that doesn't understand what the church is. A couple of fanatics that are, super spreaders having meetings. So, Maximus says, as they come together, lock your shields! And so they all put their shields, overlapping shields, because when you overlap shields, you've increased arithmetically, geometrically, the strength of your ability to resist, because in an overlapping shield, your strength is multiplied by the strength of unity and proximity to another shield. So now, if you roll alone, it can roll you over. But if you've got one to the right, one to the left, you've got a whole, it diffuses the impact to the body.
Right.
So the chariot comes rolling and goes, hold, 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 and the chariot's rolling right out. And you've got to bust this thing up like a bowling ball with bowling pins. And then the Maximus gives the great command, as one! And they all shout, as one! And they lean into their shields, overlapping each other, and the chariot, boom, repulses off of it, so that it cannot penetrate or break up the unity displayed by the gladiators who are operating in the middle of the arena. Now the crowd is like, whoo, and they get up and they go to the balcony. They want to see, this is interesting, because it's a remnant against them. It's like David against Goliath. The next scene, the chariots come back again, swirling, arrows are flying. There's one guy that wasn't paying attention. He's all by himself. He takes off, and he gets shot and killed. Well, that's what happens when you're not paying attention. Matter of fact, this is a great subtitle. You know what he says? Every man for himself. He wasn't paying attention to the command for unity. So they come back, boom, this time they're going to break up this situation. Maximus is in command, he goes, hold, hold, and you think he's going to say as one. He doesn't say as one. And you wouldn't know what he says, unless you had the subtitles accidentally up. Like I had one time during the conference. Because I would tell the story and have the scene up there, but then somebody unfortunately had the subtitles, which was working against me. Because you would have, crowd yelling, man gurgling, People are laughing because they was messing up my story when they were reading it. And sure enough, had it not happened, I never would have known. The command that Maximus gives isn't as one. The command is jagged diamond. Jagged diamond would be the military command that instead of overlapping your shields as one to repulse, tilt the shield to produce a ramp and let the enemy use the momentum of their attack to overshoot you.
Wow.
Make them go too far.
Wow.
Let them go too far.
Wow.
And then, after you've been united, you've disrupted their ability to continue the formation they have, and you can now divide. And so what happens is they ramp back, the chariot goes up in the air, and they thrust, and they flip the chariot over. Now they've basically jagged diamond. It was the technique Alexander the Great had perfected. And so they flipped the chariots. Now Maximus says, single column, single column. Now they're going to divide, and they can track the traffic in the middle. He gets on one of the horses. Now he's on the media mountain. And he's broadcasting, and the crowd is listening to what he's saying and explaining what's really going on. And now they're getting converted from cheering, for the good guys against the barbarian horde, to realize the barbarian horde actually is the team we want to cheer for.
Yeah.
Maximus comes up behind them, cutting off heads gloriously on a white horse. And when it's done, it's like, Hollywood symbolism. You can ask for a better scene. And at the end, they're all going, Maximus, Maximus. Now they're all cheering. They're all in unity for the remnant that overcame the majority. Here's the amazing thing. I look up jagged diamond because I'm curious in the Bible about the manifestation. I'm getting this verse coming to me from Ephesians. That even now, unto the principalities and powers by the church shall be made manifest the manifold glory of God. The word for manifold is the word, many facets of the diamond. So, a remnant in California. Not too small, or doesn't have sufficient quorum power to overturn the gates of hell, but a sufficient remnant, meeting some criteria that the Spirit of God has, can model unity, and there'll be a facet of the glory of God in the wisdom, strategy, and anointing revealed in California that will be different than Texas or Florida. There'll be similarities, but each state is going to have to model its own unity to overturn the gates of hell.
Amen.
Does that make sense to you? Because you see what's happened is these gates have been occupied now.
Sorry, guys.
You got your big money Wall Street, and I realized that the small business guy is actually the guy that drives 70% of the American economy. They're being destroyed by the way the government's handling business. So it's the big businesses wiping out the small businesses. Tell you, it's insidious. So watch how this works. The church over here, well, I don't have the money to follow in politics. Well, certainly I'm not so sure about Trump. I think Trump idolatry is what the problem is. I just don't want the guy. So you got all this Trump, you know, Tourette's manifestation. It's not done yet. People that were closet Trump haters are now openly manifesting.
It's true.
Meanwhile, watch this. This is what you got to see. All right, watch this shit. I'm just going to turn this thing around. It's a lot easier than erasing. I'll be right back. Thank you very much. Thank you. There we go. There we are. So what's happened is this. You see, this is what communism and socialism do. We got to educate even our Christians because I'm sorry, they're going off to Bible college and not even getting this. What happens is, see, this is the church and family. This is what we found out during COVID and academia. And, wait a second. And media and arts and business. Check this out. Got these hands right here, right? Because this is now government. So when you have socialism or communism, it takes control disproportionately of all the other spheres.
That's true.
You got to get this clear because this is when we go from this to this. Now we're starting to understand. These gates of hell, once they're occupied, they'll shift spheres. So that now, people are talking about a separation of church and state. That's done, baby. The progressives, the Marxists, and the Democrats have already targeted the church. Now government has assumed an authority over and around the church, determining. So you got to go to courts to find out if you have a right to have a Bible study in your house.
Right. Yeah.
And good pastors are threatened with jail, and all of you are threatened with fines, eventually imprisonment.
Right. Yeah.
In your own government. And you still got preachers that are sitting there saying, stay out of politics, try to be neutral. Look, there's no difference between a Democrat or Republican. Well, that was the case.
Right.
Back in the day. But if you aren't awake right now, you're not in the awakening.
Right.
So now, the deal is the federal government, this is almost like the Civil War in reverse. It's a fascinating piece of American history. You know, but history does work in cycles. So where we are now is technically called the fourth turn. That would be the fourth crucible of the United States. Every 70 to 95 years, America goes through a cycle of definition, whether it will survive or not. We're in that fourth crucible right now, and it's questionable if we're going to survive because I think that Donald Trump was meant to be an extension of grace and mercy if the church would have been mobilized to do what it's got to do. And I know everybody's groping for explanations why it didn't happen. And I know there's a bunch of people that are still saying, well, Trump is still the president. Sorry, he is not going to be coming back to the Biden-Harris administration.
Right.
Yeah.
You can reject me as a prophet. I haven't been wrong on any of this yet. No. I'm not popular, but I'm not wrong. And there's a reason why. And you know what it was? It was Rush Limbaugh that explained it to me. Rush explained it. He said, the problem isn't that God doesn't want Donald Trump to be president. God does it. Yeah. It's that there are matters where there has to be agreement. There has to be, in other words, it's like the tribes of Israel crossing over to the land of promise. There was a window where it was open for them. Joshua and Caleb saw it. The other tribes didn't want to do it. And then they went back and looked, the window closed, and that's it.
Wow.
The king couldn't go back to Elisha and say, hold it, wait a second, rewind the tape. Let me try it again. He could go back and do it. Retake. Half the country. You see the tops of those mountains?
Yeah.
Half the country wants what they're getting.
Wow. Yes, that's true.
It's not about, well, it's just not fair. It's not right. God is a just God. You are so naive. You know how much injustice goes on in the world? You know what kind of persecution
Yeah.
is going on against your brothers and sisters in China?
Yep.
You know what kind of atrocities are being done?
Yeah.
And you think that because you got robbed of an election result, that God's going to say, well, hold it right there.
That's right.
Americans. We do it differently now.
Yep. That's right.
Kennedy didn't win. We now know in history Mayor Daley, through the election, he had the unions and all that. He was able to throw, and notice he got Chicago. Chicago's always been a corrupt city. Chicago, he was able to throw Chicago so that the tie was broken by Mayor Daley in Chicago with the Union Democrats. And so Kennedy, whose dad paid off Daley and other people to get the son elected, had Nixon had the capacity to defer. He would have his opportunity president later.
Wow.
So you already have evidence of a time when an election was stolen, and it was dangerous. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis, probably because the wrong guy was in the White House.
Right.
We almost had a nuclear exchange with Russia. Because Kennedy met with Khrushchev, and Kennedy was sick and needed medication. He had a regular shot of amphetamines and vitamin B+, and the doctor who would travel with him wasn't with him when he met with Khrushchev. Khrushchev saw him without his amphetamine injection, and he came to the conclusion, he's weak and America's weak.
Yeah.
Just like they look at Biden and think we're weak.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous thing when you got the wrong person there. But half the country, academia, Wall Street, Hollywood, a bunch of the church.
Yep.
This is what they wanted. My big fear is God's giving them what they want. $30 trillion. They're doing this for money and power.
Right.
Knuckleheads. I agree with everything that Mario Rose said. That's why we get along so well. I was reading about where the discontented among them that were greedy. You see, the race issue is a greed issue. It's about how to divide America for the sake of divvying up power and money. Don't believe for a moment that America's got the race issue you're hearing about, because you're listening to the media and academia and weak preachers.
Come on.
This issue works. So they're going to keep doing it until it's pushed back on. $30 trillion. My God, President Obama did an $800 billion TARP bailout. He doesn't remember it, but everybody's screaming bloody murder. It was such a big devastation. During the period of COVID, we had $6 trillion. The only reason America can get away with that is because we've got a printing press in the basement and the world is using our currency. But the world hates us.
Yep.
And the moment that this EU reevaluation called a reset takes place in Europe at Davos,
Yeah.
they're going to redefine America within the basket of currencies because they're going to say our fiscal discipline is out. Therefore, they're going to include other currencies in the basket, and that's the moment when your precious dollar is going to come back home like Venezuela. And when 30 trillion come back, remember the verse in the Bible. You lusted for quail? Guess what? You got quail. 30 trillion of them coming out of your nostrils.
Yeah.
Because when the dollar comes home, inflation hits, the world isn't using American money. What happens?
Right.
And why did it happen?
Yeah.
Because the church slept when it should have been guarding the country.
Yep.
Now, we're not totally there yet. But you see how, you ever see the Dickens? You ever see the Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
Remember Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
I never saw Christmas Carol. It's a great scene with Charles Dickens. He goes into the future and he sees what's going to happen. And it's like then he comes back to the present. He realizes how badly he screwed up. It produces repentance.
Right.
That's what good preaching and teaching is supposed to do.
Come on.
It's supposed to make you see the horrors of hell so bad you want to repent and never go there. It makes you stop playing footsie with sin and realize, heck, I'm getting back from the line. I'm not going to go play with it. That's what Ananias and Sapphira dropping dead does in a church service. That's why everybody goes, whoa, okay, back up. So everything I'm describing to you, we're still at the point of two alternate futures.
Right.
I'm giving you the ghost of Christmas future.
Wow. Wow.
You don't have to go there.
Yeah.
If the church does what it's got to do.
Right.
But what's it going to have to do? Well, I'm out of time. There's never time to talk about that.
It's in the book.
Anyway, here's a plan. And the reality is that unless, and we've got our revival students. I'm sorry, some of our brightest and bestest in our Bible schools Here's a mistake. You're not going to supernatural your way out of this. If a reformation,
Yes.
you know what a reformation is? A reformation is institutional.
Yes.
A revival, it's a great little definition, it is personal.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm getting hit from the National Review, I'm getting hit from they're just, this religious spirit's already trying to hit me for the Seven Mountain Dominionism message. Like, we're in danger of getting carried away with taking too much territory.
Right.
I know I'm dealing with a spirit. Because you gotta be nuts.
Yes.
It's like accusing the Amish community of excess fashion. So the Reformation is institutional. It's reforming something, a system.
Yeah.
And it isn't systemic racism.
Amen.
Institutional reform. It requires a personal revival to have the chutzpah to do a reformation.
Yeah.
And chutzpah is a good Jewish word. You'll find it in the
Yes.
Greek concordance.
Right.
You need revival to do that. So we're talking about ecclesia. Ecclesia is a useless concept unless you understand where it applies.
Yeah.
The church over here is really, understand, you're not supposed to be getting, it's not that you have to get involved in politics. What you should be doing is you should be teaching your people how to fulfill the call of God, and the congregation should be going into all these areas.
Right.
I get it when we talk preaching somebody, I understand, but they should be speaking the truth to their people and then mobilizing them to go into all the world and supporting them as they do it.
Yes.
Where's the ecclesia? The ecclesia is a small band, 2, 3, 4 or more, enough to basically fit into a house. What you want to have is, you want to have a company of like precious faith, like Daniel had in Babylon, that can get together with and intercede, because the closer you are to the gates of hell, the closer you are to proximity, the closer you are to attack.
Say it.
And so there's an element of discretion involved. I understand this. I get this more better than most people. I'm not sending people, I'm not doing selfies at every place that I go for this reason, because I'm trying to protect the people I'm working with. But the fact of the matter is, your ecclesia, right there with Daniel, is able to seek, and we should have small companies of practitioners who are subject matter experts, like 100-fold types in these fields, banding together because they know how to deal with the principalities that are at the top of their system. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the prophetic community ought to be coming together in humility and putting out it's a shame not to vet what each other says, because I couldn't say what I said today if I had to submit what I'm saying to a group of teachers before I get on the platform. But after I say it, my wife is going to tell me what I did wrong. Guarantee every time.
God bless her. Because I love you.
Yeah, there you go.
Accountability is not a bad thing. But the fact is, if the prophets would get together and have the courage to be like locking their shields and unifying their voices, we wouldn't have a QAnon problem. So I'm telling you, a bunch of the prophets were listening to the QAnon post where they can only go on, and it's a great awakening. I know it. Because they're upset with me for not being part of it. I said, nah, this is off.
Right.
But QAnon is there because the prophets weren't.
Yeah.
And the prophets made the same mistake in Haggai. You want to read what's happened to us in America? Same thing happened to the Jews. God sent Cyrus, and he opened the door. He said, all right, I'll hold them back. Do your thing. At that moment, the church should have been rising up and doing a critical reassessment of the destiny of the world. At that moment, we needed the apostolic conference. The apostles are important because the apostles, I think, I know there's all kinds of debates about this, but I believe this. I believe that when the apostles come into place and they embrace the prophets don't have to fight for their existence, then the apostles and prophets together can mobilize and affect a remnant. So you have Zerubbabel and Joshua and the remnant. They go back to Jerusalem during the time of Cyrus because God said, rebuild your house. Because the house of God here should be building the house of God at the top of each of these places. You should be the head and not the tail, above and not beneath. Haggai. You read it. I'm going to shake heaven and earth. I'm going to shake everything that can be shaken. I'm going to shake political system. I'm going to shake the nation. I'm going to shake it all. You know why? So that the glory can come into my house. But you see, my house isn't the place down the street that gathers together independent from the rest of the culture and then tries to supernatural them into an awakening. That's not how it's going to happen. You have to go into the system. You can't do it from outside. You got to go into the strong man's house. How are you going to buy a strong man if you're not in this flipping house? Anyway. Any questions? The books. Thank you. The revival, personal. The church gets revived. The Reformation is what touches the nation. And what's going to happen is, I'm telling you this. The next thing, what happened with Haggai? You know what happened with Haggai? Please listen to me. God had one problem. He said, I want my house built. I put Cyrus in there for my house. My house is the glorious house. It's a house for the nations. What kind of a house was it? It was a house for the nation. It was the temple for the nation. God wants the United States church to rise up for the sake of the nation.
Maybe run the product.
I'm getting attacked on this.
Yeah.
The latest of some.
That's
Christian
what I got,
nationalism. Everywhere you go, you're going to hear it slandered. It's like being white racist. Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism. Christian. What the heck is... Here's what a Christian nationalist is. Someone who happens to be a Christian that doesn't want to see the nation flushed down the toilet. They're not mad at anybody. They're not trying to pick a fight with anybody. They're just not burning flags. They don't believe they want to be Marxists. They like Jesus. They don't want their kids being forced to be transgender. I know there's fanatics, potential Christian nationalists that are like, bad people. But the label is being used to whack every one of you from the notion of being the church for the nation. You know what God's problem with? Why was he shaking up Israel? With economic judgment and a plague, by the way. Why did it happen? Because my house is neglected while you're all building your house.
Come on.
I'm sorry to say, churches and ministries that know how to do it did better with COVID than without. That's not building God's house. That's using the internet.
What are you saying? Here, kneel down. We might be able to run the product for Mr.
Does this make sense to anybody?
Yes.
Meeting here is building God's
Okay, guys.
house. All right.